The sun was shining brightly on a quiet suburban street. Birds chirped cheerfully in the trees, and the gentle breeze carried the smell of freshly cut grass. On the driveway of one house, two twin girls were laughing and playing. Their hair bounced with every jump rope swing, and their chalk drawings spread across the driveway in colorful patterns. They were fully absorbed in their game, calling out to each other, laughing at their mistakes, and cheering when one of them managed a perfect jump. Across the street, a white woman was standing on her porch, arms crossed, watching them. Her brow was furrowed, and her lips pressed into a thin line. At first she seemed to be merely observing, but gradually her expression shifted into something sharper, more suspicious. She squinted at the girls, watching the way they ran and played. She couldn't see any adults with them immediately, and began to feel uneasy. Though there was nothing actually threatening about the scene, her imagination started to fill in stories of things going wrong, of children left unsupervised, of a situation she had no real reason to fear. The girls, unaware of the scrutiny, continued their play. They shouted each other's names with joy, spun in circles, and drew hearts and stars with colorful chalk on the driveway. Their laughter echoed down the street, light and free. A few neighbors walked by, waving or nodding hello. It was an ordinary, calm Saturday morning, the kind of day when everyone in the neighborhood expected a peaceful, uneventful weekend. But from across the street, the woman's unease grew. Her mind jumped to worst-case scenarios. She imagined accidents, chaos, or something she could not control. Her thoughts raced, each one more dramatic than the last. She felt a growing sense of urgency and decided she needed help. Without thinking twice, she reached for her phone and called the police. She explained quickly, her voice tight with worry, that there were two young girls playing outside with no adult nearby, and that something felt off. In her mind, she was doing the right thing. She believed she was protecting children, even though the girls were perfectly safe and simply enjoying their morning. The girls remained unaware, still immersed in their imaginative world. They built invisible castles, pretended to be superheroes, and raced each other to see who could reach the end of the driveway first. Their energy was contagious, and any passerby would have felt the happiness in their laughter. They didn't hear the voice on the other side of the street making a call, and they certainly didn't imagine that a few minutes later, police officers would be driving up in response to someone else's fear. The woman on the porch watched the street as she ended her call, pacing slightly as she waited. She muttered to herself about how children should not be left unattended. Her worry was genuine in her mind, but it was based on assumptions rather than reality. She glanced back at the girls, seeing only what she wanted to see, a situation that, in her view, could be unsafe, though to anyone else, it was perfectly normal. The girls paused for a moment, catching their breath, and waved at a neighbor walking by. The neighbor waved back, smiling at the simple joy of children playing outside. The street looked calm and peaceful, nothing unusual, but the tension was building across the way. The woman's imagination had created a storm out of thin air, setting the stage for something that should never have happened. As minutes passed, the sound of sirens grew in the distance. The girls' game slowed as they heard the unfamiliar noise. They stopped and looked around, unsure what was happening. The neighborhood, usually a quiet place of comfort, suddenly seemed filled with uncertainty. The woman on the porch felt a sense of vindication, believing that she had made the right call. She straightened her posture and waited for the arrival of help, convinced that the situation required intervention. The twins' laughter faded into cautious whispers. They held each other's hands and looked toward the street nervously. They had never experienced something like this. It was strange and confusing. Their game had been innocent, and yet the presence of the police made them feel like they might be in trouble for something they didn't do. The sun still shone, but its warmth felt different now, shadowed by the tension that had suddenly entered their peaceful morning. From inside nearby homes, other neighbors noticed the approaching police cars. Some peeked through their windows, wondering what was happening. Murmurs spread along the street as people speculated quietly about the unfolding scene. The girls' parents were not yet present, but soon the mother would arrive, changing the energy of the situation entirely. At this moment, though, everything seemed poised on the edge of misunderstanding. The girls stood in the driveway, still holding their chalk and jump ropes, watching the police cars approach. The woman on the porch continued to watch, her initial fear transforming into satisfaction at the thought that she had called the authorities in time. Yet the reality was that the twins were perfectly safe, and the entire scenario had been created by fear, bias, and a rush to judgment. The story of this ordinary morning, filled with laughter and play, had suddenly taken a turn toward tension and confusion. What should have been a simple, joyful Saturday had become an unsettling scene, all because someone misread a moment and allowed assumptions to dictate action. And as the police cars drew closer, the first part of this story reached its peak, setting the stage for the events that would follow once the twins' mother arrived, calm, composed, and ready to handle the situation with dignity and strength. This first part captures the innocence of the twins and the fear of the neighbor, showing how quickly misunderstanding and bias can escalate a perfectly normal situation. The energy, emotion, and anticipation are built to engage the audience, ensuring they feel invested in what will happen next. The sound of sirens grew louder, echoing down the quiet suburban street, a sharp contrast to the soft laughter that had filled the morning. The twin girls, still holding their jump ropes, looked toward the approaching police cars with wide, uncertain eyes. Their small hands clutched each other, seeking comfort and reassurance from the presence of a familiar sibling. They didn't understand why the vehicles were coming, why their innocent play had drawn attention, or why someone had made a call that now brought uniformed officers into their peaceful morning. As the police cars pulled up in front of the house, the girls instinctively stepped back slightly, unsure if they had done something wrong. The officers stepped out, their faces calm and professional, scanning the scene carefully. They carried radios and notebooks, ready to take statements, but their eyes softened when they saw the two young children, small and unassuming, standing together in the driveway. There was nothing alarming about them, nothing that suggested danger. Yet the tension remained, created entirely by a misunderstanding fueled by fear and assumption. The woman who had made the call stepped closer to the officers, her chest tight with a sense of urgency. She explained quickly, almost breathlessly, that there were two girls playing outside without supervision. She spoke of her concerns, her voice a mixture of worry and frustration, describing what she had seen and how it had made her feel. She looked at the officers with pleading eyes, hoping they would act quickly to ensure the children's safety. In her mind, she was right. She had seen something that required action, even if the reality was far less dramatic. The officers nodded politely and began to ask questions, not immediately turning their attention to the girls themselves, but rather to the caller. They listened carefully, jotting down notes, their training helping them remain neutral. They asked for clarification, details about what the girls were doing and whether any adults were nearby. The woman repeated her concerns, pointing toward the driveway, her gestures emphasizing her nervousness. Yet as the officers looked closer, they began to see the innocence of the situation. The chalk on the driveway, the jump ropes, the way the girls moved in unison, laughing and calling to each other. It was a normal, happy scene, nothing threatening at all. Some neighbors had started to gather at this point, curious about the commotion. People peeked out of windows, stepped onto their porches, and exchanged quiet whispers. A few approached cautiously, asking questions and watching the interaction unfold. There was a mix of confusion, concern, and quiet disapproval, as they realized that the entire scene had been triggered by a misinterpretation. The twins continued to stand there holding hands, still unsure about what was happening, but their fear slowly giving way to curiosity about the strange visitors in uniform. The officers, now beginning to assess the situation for themselves, spoke gently to the girls, asking simple questions to understand what they were doing. The twins explained that they were playing a game, drawing pictures, and racing each other down the driveway. Their voices were small but clear, filled with the natural excitement of children describing something they loved. The officers exchanged glances, silently acknowledging that the call had been unnecessary. They could see that the girls were safe, happy, and completely innocent of any wrongdoing. Meanwhile, the woman who had called the police stood nearby, her confidence waning as says. He saw the situation clearly for the first time. The officers asked if she had spoken with the children's parents, and she admitted that she had not. She realized that her assumptions had led her to involve authorities prematurely, creating a tension that had no real basis. A quiet sense of embarrassment replaced her initial urgency, though she tried to maintain composure. insisting that she had only wanted to protect the children. The twin girls, now slightly more relaxed, continued their explanation of the game they had been playing. They showed the officers their chalk drawings, pointing to hearts, stars, and whimsical shapes that decorated the driveway. They laughed softly, inviting the officers to see how much fun they had been having. One officer crouched down to their level, smiling warmly, asking questions about the game and showing genuine interest in their creativity. The girls' fear faded further, replaced by the comfort of friendly attention. The small crowd of neighbors had begun to murmur among themselves. Some expressed quiet frustration at the unnecessary call, while others offered words of support to the girls. It became clear that the scene was a misunderstanding, a tension created not by danger but by fear and perception. Conversations began to emerge about assumptions, the importance of context, and how quickly a simple, innocent moment could escalate into something stressful when judgment was clouded by worry or bias. The officers, now fully understanding the situation, spoke with the woman again, explaining that the children were safe and that there was no need for concern. They advised her to observe carefully before calling authorities in the future and to consider whether a situation truly required intervention. She nodded, a mix of relief and shame washing over her. She had acted with what she believed was caution, but now she realized that her fear had created unnecessary stress for the girls and their community. The twins, watching the adults speak, held hands and exchanged quiet smiles. They had endured an unsettling moment, but they were unharmed and still able to enjoy the morning. Their laughter began to return, tentative at first, then more confidently, as the officer stepped back and the neighbor retreated to her porch. The children's energy, resilient and pure, slowly reclaimed the space around them. As the officers prepared to leave, they made a point to speak kindly to the twins once more. They encouraged the girls to continue enjoying their day safely and reminded them that they had done nothing wrong. The girls waved goodbye, their smiles wide and genuine, signaling that the tension of the moment had begun to fade. The officers left, their presence having briefly heightened the stress but ultimately resolving without incident. The quiet hum of the neighborhood returned, though the memory of the unusual morning lingered. The twin girls resumed their play, running and jumping with renewed freedom. Their chalk drawings expanded, more elaborate and joyful than before. The small crowd of neighbors began to disperse, some shaking their heads, others exchanging knowing smiles about the misunderstandings that can happen when assumptions cloud judgment. The woman who had called the police watched from her porch, her face thoughtful. She understood now that her fear had been misplaced, and that what she had interpreted as potential danger was actually an innocent, joyful moment. There was a lesson in the experience, one she would carry forward, about observation, judgment, and the importance of seeing people clearly rather than through the lens of assumptions. In this second part of the story, the neighborhood had experienced a moment of tension but also a moment of clarity. The twin girls, resilient and joyful, continued their play unaffected by the unnecessary drama. The officers, professional and calm, ensured safety while gently correcting a misunderstanding, and the neighbors, witnessing the unfolding scene, began to reflect on how fear and assumptions can escalate ordinary situations, reminding everyone that careful observation and empathy are far more powerful than hasty judgment. The calm of the morning was shattered only briefly, but that moment of tension had already left its mark on the twin girls. Their small hands still clutched each other's, and their eyes scanned the street as the police cars began to leave. They were safe, yes, but they had experienced something unfamiliar, something confusing. Their laughter was starting to return, soft and tentative, as they looked at their chalk drawings and the jumble of jump ropes. It was then that the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into the driveway made everyone on the street look toward the approaching vehicle. The mother of the twin girls stepped out of the car, her presence immediately commanding attention. There was a calm confidence in the way she walked, the kind of assurance that came from someone who had faced challenges before and knew how to handle them. She carried herself with ease, her eyes scanning the scene as she approached her children. She noticed the leftover tension in the neighborhood, the lingering worry on the neighbor's face, and the curiosity of those who had gathered to watch. She did not rush. She moved with purpose, her steps measured and deliberate. The twins ran to her as soon as she was close enough, their small arms wrapping around her legs. They whispered about what had happened, their words tumbling out in a mixture of fear, excitement, and relief. The mother listened patiently, her arms holding them tightly as she soothed their fears. She spoke softly, assuring them that they had done nothing wrong, that they were safe, and that she was there to protect them. Her voice was steady, warm, and filled with love, calming both her children and the neighborhood in one simple gesture. The woman who had called the police remained on her porch watching in silence. The energy of the moment shifted as the mother's authority and composure became clear. She did not raise her voice, did not act with anger or hostility, but her presence alone communicated that she was in control. The twin girls, sensing the strength and protection of their mother, began to relax completely. Their hands left hers to pick up chalk and jump ropes again, but they kept glances toward her, feeling secure. The officers, still present but ready to leave, approached the mother. She greeted them politely, introducing herself and explaining that the twins were her children and had been playing outside under her watchful eyes. Her tone was respectful but firm, giving the officers all the information they needed to understand that the previous concerns were unfounded. The officers nodded, satisfied that the situation was resolved. They thanked her for her cooperation and left, their presence no longer required, leaving the street calm once again. As the police cars disappeared, a few neighbors approached cautiously, murmuring words of apology or curiosity. The mother remained composed, listening to them with patience. She explained the situation simply, telling them that the girls had been playing and that there was no reason for alarm. She addressed the neighbor directly, calmly stating that the girls were safe and that the morning had been disrupted by a misunderstanding. Her words were measured, not accusatory, but carried a quiet weight that made the neighbor pause. The woman on the porch could only nod, realizing for the first time how unnecessary her actions had been. The twins watched this interaction, their eyes wide with admiration for their mother. They had seen her handle a tense situation without anger, without fear, and with confidence that reassured everyone around her. They felt proud, protected, and understood. Their trust in their mother deepened, and their playful energy returned fully. They picked up their chalk, their jump ropes, and resumed their game, now more joyful than before, drawing bigger, brighter shapes and laughing freely. The neighborhood, too, began to settle into a quieter rhythm. The murmurs of the neighbors softened, replaced by nods and smiles as they observed the mother's calm handling of the situation. Some began to reflect on how easily fear and assumptions could escalate unnecessary tension. The incident had become a quiet lesson in empathy, perspective, and the power of composure. The mother's presence had transformed a stressful morning into a teaching moment for everyone who had witnessed it. The woman on the porch now faced her own reflection. She had acted out of fear and a misunderstanding, and she could feel the weight of embarrassment pressing on her. The mother did not confront her with harsh words, but her quiet authority made it clear that the truth of the situation was obvious. The neighbor felt the lesson without needing it explained, understanding that assumptions could create unnecessary fear and that observing carefully before acting was always wiser. Meanwhile, the twins continued to play, filling the driveway with their laughter and bright drawings. Their imagination had returned fully, unshadowed by the brief moment of confusion. They raced, they jumped, they drew, and they laughed, their energy and innocence reclaiming the space around them. The mother watched, smiling quietly, pleased to see her children safe and happy. Her own presence had restored balance to the morning, turning what could have been a lasting tension into a simple misunderstanding that now seemed almost surreal in its unnecessary drama. The sun continued to shine, casting warm light across the neighborhood. Trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the scent of freshly cut grass drifted through the air. Everything appeared as it had before the incident, yet the morning had been changed subtly. A lesson had been imparted quietly and naturally, about observation, understanding, and the human tendency to assume the worst. The twins had experienced a minor scare, but they had also witnessed strength and composure firsthand, lessons they would carry with them beyond this single morning. The mother knelt down beside the girls for a moment, asking them questions about their game, about the drawings and about how they felt. Her gentle curiosity reminded them that their feelings mattered, that they were heard and understood. She spoke about the importance of playing safely, about being aware of surroundings, and about trusting that she would always be there to protect them. Her words were simple, heartfelt, and full of love. The twins nodded, absorbing each one, feeling the warmth of her care. As the morning continued, the mother encouraged the girls to invite a few neighbors' children to join them in play. Slowly, other kids came outside, bringing their own toys and games. The driveway transformed into a lively space of friendship and laughter, bridging gaps in the neighborhood and creating a sense of community. The earlier tension faded completely, replaced by joy, connection, and a renewed sense of shared humanity. The woman who had called the police watched from her porch, quiet now, understanding that her actions had been unnecessary. She had caused a small stir, but she had also witnessed firsthand the calm authority of the mother and the resilience of the children. There was no need for further confrontation. The lesson was clear. Observing, understanding, and allowing space for perspective were more valuable than fear-driven assumptions. The mother remained nearby, her eyes always gently on the twins, ensuring their safety while allowing them to explore and enjoy the morning fully. The neighborhood watched, some in quiet admiration, others in thoughtful reflection as the scene unfolded. It was a reminder that calm, dignity, and love could resolve tensions far more effectively than fear or assumptions. The twins' laughter, now full and unrestrained, echoed through the street, a symbol of innocence and resilience. By the time the morning had passed, the incident had become a story in the neighborhood, one that would be remembered not for conflict, but for resolution, composure, and the power of a strong, caring parent. The mother's actions had restored balance, protected her children, and provided a quiet but powerful lesson in empathy and understanding. The twins had learned a little more about trust, courage, and the strength of love, carrying these lessons with them into the rest of their day, while the neighborhood absorbed the importance of perspective and patience. This third part captures the turning point of the story, where the mother's arrival changes everything. Her calm, confident presence diffuses the tension, reassures the twins, and teaches both the neighborhood and the woman who called the police valuable lessons about composure, understanding, and the power of empathy. The morning that had started with innocent laughter and play had shifted into something heavier, something that carried tension and curiosity throughout the neighborhood. The twin girls had returned to their game after their mother arrived, their energy slowly restoring the calm that had been lost. Their chalk drawings sprawled across the driveway, full of hearts, stars, and imaginative shapes, seemed to radiate joy, and with each giggle, the tension in the air loosened bit by bit. The neighbors, who had gathered earlier to watch the unfolding drama, began to murmur among themselves. Some were still unsure what had happened, their expressions a mix of curiosity and embarrassment. Others had begun to whisper quietly about the events, talking about assumptions, fear, and the importance of perspective. The mother, standing nearby, observed this subtle shift in the community without judgment. Her focus remained on her children, ensuring they were safe while allowing the surrounding environment to adjust and settle naturally. Slowly, the crowd of neighbors began to approach, a few at a time, offering tentative words to the mother. They apologized quietly for the disturbance, though none had been directly responsible. Their voices were soft, reflective, carrying a sense of acknowledgement rather than blame. The mother listened patiently, her calm demeanor making it easy for others to speak honestly. She reassured them that the children were safe, and that the morning's events, while stressful, had not caused any harm. Her words carried weight, because they were spoken from experience and understanding, not anger. A few of the neighbors spoke directly to the woman who had called the police. Their tone was gentle but pointed, explaining that while concern for children was natural, assumptions and fear could create unnecessary tension. The woman listened, her face a mix of discomfort and realization. She nodded quietly, understanding that her call had been driven by fear and misinterpretation rather than genuine danger. The mother did not need to say anything further. Her presence, the way she had handled the situation, and her protective authority over her children had spoken volumes. The woman began to reflect on her own assumptions, feeling the quiet lessons settle in her mind. Meanwhile, the twins had resumed their play, their laughter ringing through the street. The joy of the children was infectious, drawing other kids from the neighborhood to join in. Soon the driveway became a hub of activity, full of chatter, running feet, and shared games. The earlier tension faded further as the community's focus shifted from fear to connection, from assumptions to engagement. The mother encouraged her children to include others, fostering a sense of camaraderie and inclusion. She explained to them in simple words that playing together could build friendships and that kindness often mattered more than competition. The neighbors, observing this, began to reflect on their own behavior and the events that had unfolded. Some admitted quietly to themselves that assumptions had clouded their judgment at times, and that fear could escalate ordinary situations unnecessarily. Others spoke softly to each other about the importance of patience, empathy, and taking time to truly understand what was happening before reacting. The presence of the mother and her children had become a living example of how composure, understanding, and respect could calm even the most tense circumstances. Across the street, the woman who had called the police remained on her porch, now silent. The activity of the children, the calm authority of the mother, and the growing sense of community awareness made her reflect. She realized that her actions had been unnecessary, and that fear and assumptions could have negative consequences. She watched the twins play, their laughter now carefree, and felt the weight of her earlier mistake. There was no confrontation, no harsh words exchanged, only a quiet personal reckoning with the consequences of assumptions. The mother, aware of the woman's presence, did not call attention to it. She understood that lessons often worked best when they were observed rather than forced. Her attention remained on her children and the other neighborhood kids, facilitating games, encouraging sharing, and fostering inclusivity. The twins learned not only about play but about confidence, resilience, and the importance of calm composure in stressful situations. They began to invite others to join, explaining the rules of their games, teaching the joy of shared creativity, and building bridges of friendship that had not existed earlier in the morning. As the day progressed, conversations among the adults began to shift from gossip to reflection. The events became a gentle reminder that appearances could be misleading, and that judging situations too quickly often led to unnecessary stress. Parents in the neighborhood spoke quietly about the need to trust children's innocence and to approach moments of uncertainty with empathy rather than fear. Those who had not directly participated in the morning's tension felt inspired by the mother's approach, realizing that leadership, calm authority, and kindness could shape the community positively. The twins, feeling safe and confident, continued their play with new friends, sharing laughter and games that brought energy back to the street. Their creativity expanded as they invented new games, shared jump ropes, and painted new chalk designs on the driveway. The joy of children, pure and unfiltered, became a living lesson to everyone around them. That innocence, play, and simple human connection could counteract fear and tension effectively. Neighbors observed the change, many silently reflecting on their own responses and the importance of measured actions. The morning had created tension, yes, but it had also provided a learning opportunity. The mother's composure, kindness, and authority had allowed the twins to continue playing without fear, while also teaching the broader community about empathy and awareness. The woman who had called the police experienced the moment quietly, understanding the impact of assumptions and recognizing the need for careful observation in the future. By mid-morning, the street had returned to a calm rhythm. The children's laughter continued, the neighborly chatter grew softer and more reflective, and the mother remained nearby, ensuring her children were safe while fostering a sense of connection among the neighborhood kids. She did not need to intervene aggressively. Her presence alone maintained order and reassurance. The twins felt proud, happy, and secure, their day restored to one of joy and play. The neighborhood, having witnessed the unfolding events, carried with it a subtle shift in awareness. Conversations about assumptions, fear, and understanding continued quietly in homes and on porches. Adults reflected on how quickly situations could escalate without careful observation and empathy. Children, observing their peers and the guidance of a composed adult, learned about inclusion, resilience, and the importance of community support. The lessons of the morning were imprinted not through confrontation, but through observation, reflection, and the gentle power of human connection. As the afternoon approached, the twins' laughter echoed across the street, uninterrupted and joyful. The driveway, once a site of tension and confusion, had transformed into a place of creativity, friendship, and learning. The mother watched quietly, satisfied that her children were safe, happy, and learning important lessons about life, trust, and resilience. The neighborhood, having experienced a small moment of collective reflection, moved forward with a heightened awareness of empathy, understanding, and the importance of measured action. In this fourth part of the story, the focus is on the community reaction and reflection. The tension of the morning is replaced by connection, understanding, and observation of human behavior. The mother's calm authority, the twins' innocence and resilience, and the quiet lessons learned by neighbors illustrate the power of empathy, patience, and mindful engagement. The community begins to understand how fear and assumptions can escalate situations unnecessarily, and how composure, care, and connection can restore peace and joy, leaving a lasting impression on everyone involved. The afternoon sun bathed the neighborhood in a warm golden glow, a gentle reminder that the day was moving forward peacefully. The twin girls continued to play outside, their laughter mixing with the soft rustling of leaves and the occasional chirp of a bird. The driveway, now covered in colorful chalk drawings, reflected their creativity and joy. It had been hours since the police had left and their mother had arrived, but the events of the morning were still fresh in everyone's mind, leaving small ripples of thought and reflection across the street. The mother sat on the porch steps, keeping a watchful eye on her children, while observing the subtle changes in the neighborhood. She had guided them through a difficult situation with patience, strength, and calm, and now she let the children lead their own play while remaining near enough to intervene if necessary. Her presence was a quiet anchor, a source of reassurance not only for her twins but also for the other neighborhood children who had come to join in their games. Her influence was seen in the careful balance between freedom and safety, allowing the children to explore and play while understanding that their mother was always nearby. The woman who had called the police remained on her porch, observing quietly. She had said nothing since the morning's events had unfolded, and her earlier urgency had transformed into contemplation. Watching the twins play and seeing the mother's calm demeanor, she felt a sense of humility. She realized how her assumptions had created tension unnecessarily, and how fear had overtaken judgment. The lesson was unspoken but clear. Observations must be made carefully, and fear should never be allowed to dictate actions before understanding the truth. Neighbors continued to move about their day, but some paused to reflect quietly on what had happened. Conversations that might have once been idle or superficial had gained depth, infused with the recognition that misunderstanding could escalate into tension when assumptions were made without care. Some spoke of the importance of observing without jumping to conclusions, others about teaching children about safety without imposing fear. The morning's events had left an imprint on the community, a subtle but powerful reminder of the role each person played in creating a safe, understanding environment. The twins, oblivious to the reflection around them, continued their games with delight. They shared chalk, taught each other new tricks with jump ropes, and invited the other neighborhood children to participate. Their laughter was a thread weaving together moments of innocence, creativity, and joy. The mother watched, occasionally smiling, occasionally offering guidance. She had used the morning's events to reinforce lessons about patience, kindness, and confidence. The twins were learning that while misunderstandings could happen, resilience, composure, and love could always restore balance. By mid-afternoon, the mother decided it was time for a small snack and some rest for the twins. She called them over gently, and they ran to her side, still giggling from the games. She handed out juice and small sandwiches, and they sat on the steps together, sharing stories of their adventures and the games they had invented. The conversations were simple, playful, and full of life. Yet beneath the laughter there was an undercurrent of reflection. The twins understood a little more about the world, about trust, about dealing with moments of uncertainty, and about the importance of having someone strong and calm by their side. The neighborhood had also begun to return to its normal rhythm, but the lessons of the morning lingered. Adults who had watched the events unfold spoke in hushed tones about the importance of measured observation and empathy. Children absorbed lessons from watching their peers play and the mother's example. There was an unspoken understanding that fear could be misleading, and that kindness, patience, and calmness were far more effective in resolving tension than panic or assumption. As the day drew on, the twins' mother decided to take them for a short walk around the block, allowing them to stretch their legs and breathe fresh air. The street felt peaceful once more, but the experiences of the morning had left a quiet imprint on everyone. The neighbors waved as they passed, some with smiles, others with thoughtful nods. The twins ran ahead for a few steps, turning back to wave at their mother, and she responded with warmth, reinforcing the sense of safety, trust, and love that had been central throughout the day. Upon returning home, the mother spoke gently with the twins about what had happened earlier in the day. She explained in simple terms that sometimes people make mistakes because they are afraid or don't understand a situation fully. She emphasized that it was important to remain confident, kind, and calm, even when facing unexpected challenges. The twins listened intently, absorbing the lessons and understanding that their mother's strength had turned a potentially upsetting morning into an opportunity to learn and grow. The evening approached, and the neighborhood slowly began to quiet down. The sounds of children playing faded, replaced by the gentle hum of daily life. The mother prepared dinner, involving the twins in small tasks, teaching them about cooperation and shared responsibility. Their bond had strengthened through the events of the day, and the mother's calm guidance left a lasting impression. Even in ordinary routines, she taught resilience, patience, and confidence, reinforcing lessons that would carry the twins through many more experiences in life. As the sun set, casting a warm orange glow over the street, the neighborhood reflected on the day. The morning's tension had been resolved, not through confrontation or anger, but through calm authority, understanding, and patience. The twins had learned about resilience and trust. The neighbors had witnessed firsthand the power of composure and empathy. Even the woman who had called the police experienced a subtle, quiet lesson about assumptions and fear. The day had provided a natural and human-centric narrative about how to navigate misunderstandings and how to foster harmony in a community. The twins, now settled inside with their mother, talked softly about their adventures. They drew pictures together, recounted the games they had played, and shared stories about the friends they had made. The mother listened, offering guidance and encouragement, instilling values of kindness, understanding, and confidence. The day had been full of challenges and lessons, but it had ended with a sense of accomplishment, safety, and love. The neighborhood, too, returned fully to its peaceful rhythm. Parents reflected on the importance of observation and patience. Children understood the value of friendship and play, and everyone carried a quiet reminder of the events that had unfolded. The morning's tension had been transformed into an opportunity for learning, growth, and community reflection. The mother's guidance and calm presence had been central to this transformation, demonstrating the power of composure, empathy, and love in even the most challenging moments. As night fell, the twins were tucked into bed, safe, happy, and full of stories to share. Their mother reflected on the day, content in the knowledge that she had protected her children, taught them valuable lessons, and fostered a subtle but meaningful understanding within the neighborhood. The day had begun with fear and misunderstanding, but ended with resilience, joy, and connection. The twins drifted to sleep, their hearts full of confidence and warmth, while the neighborhood slowly quieted, carrying with it the lessons of empathy, calmness, and human connection. This final part concludes the story with resolution, reflection, and the lasting impact of composure, empathy, and love. The morning's incident become. It was an ordinary afternoon in the heart of the city. The sun was shining brightly, casting warm light on the streets, but the air felt tense for some reason. People were walking hurriedly to get to their destinations, carrying groceries, backpacks, or their phones, absorbed in their own worlds. On one busy street corner, a young black girl no older than 16 was standing quietly with a small backpack slung over her shoulder. She held her books tightly against her chest, her fingers gripping the edges as if they could somehow protect her from the world. Her eyes scanned the street, alert and careful, because she had learned early that people often judged her before knowing her. She had come out that day just to run a few errands and pick up a few things she needed for school. Nothing about her day was extraordinary, nothing to suggest that she would be caught up in a moment that could change her life. She had on a simple outfit, a hoodie and jeans, and her hair was pulled back neatly. She blended in as much as anyone could in a busy city. Yet that was not enough to prevent what happened next. A few blocks away, a group of police officers had received a call. The details were vague. Someone had reported suspicious behavior in the area, and the officers were responding quickly, The streets were busy, and the officer's car screeched to a stop near the corner where the girl stood. She noticed them immediately, her stomach tightening. Something about the way they got out of the car, the speed, the sharpness of their movements made her uneasy. Her heart started to race, but she kept her expression calm. She had learned that keeping calm was the best way to stay safe. The officers approached her with serious faces. One of them, a tall man with sunglasses hiding his eyes, spoke first. "Hey, you there. Step over here." His tone was rough, commanding, and the girl instinctively took a step back. She raised her hands slightly in a non-threatening way, trying to show she meant no harm. I'm just waiting for a friend," she said quietly, her voice almost drowned out by the city noise around them. The officer didn't listen. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. His hand moved in a way that startled her. "We need to see some ID. You can't just stand here." The girl shook her head slowly. "I don't have my ID with me. I just came from the library." Her words didn't matter. The officer's expression hardened. He had already made a decision in his mind, assuming the worst without knowing anything about her. He didn't see a scared girl who had done nothing wrong. He saw someone to control, someone to punish. Another officer stepped forward, joining him, and the atmosphere grew heavier. Suddenly, without warning, one of the officers slapped her across the face. The sound echoed sharply in the street. People nearby froze, some gasping in shock. The girl stumbled back slightly, her hand flying to her cheek where the sting lingered. Her eyes filled with confusion and hurt. She had never been treated like that before, not by strangers and certainly not by someone who was supposed to protect her. "Why did you do that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. She wasn't angry yet. She was too shocked to feel anything but disbelief. The officer didn't answer. He just glared at her, his mouth a tight line. He seemed to be waiting for her to say something, as if her words could justify his actions, but she had nothing to say that could explain the injustice she was feeling. Around them, people had started to gather. Some had their phones out, recording the scene. Others were watching in stunned silence. No one moved forward at first. It was as if they didn't know what to do in a moment so unfair and sudden. The girl's books slipped slightly from her grasp, but she held them quickly, clutching them like a shield. She felt vulnerable, exposed, and angry, but she didn't know how to react without making things worse. "Step back," one officer barked at the crowd, trying to reassert control over the situation. The tension in the air was thick, heavy, and almost suffocating. The girl's chest felt tight, her breathing shallow. She tried to make herself small, hoping that maybe if she didn't move, the officers would leave her alone. A man walking his dog muttered under his breath, shaking his head. "That's wrong. She didn't do anything." But the officers ignored him. They were focused only on her, as if the world around them didn't exist. The girl's mind raced. She had learned in school and from her parents about how to handle encounters with the police, about staying calm, about not arguing, about keeping your hands visible. She remembered everything, and yet none of it felt enough at that moment. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing the fear and confusion that had taken over her. A woman standing nearby, older and with kind eyes, stepped closer to offer support. "Are you okay?" she asked gently, her voice trying to cut through the tension. The girl nodded quickly, not wanting to draw more attention. She was already the center of the officer's scrutiny, and any misstep could make things worse. Meanwhile, the officers whispered among themselves, glancing at each other. It was clear that they were trying to figure out their next move, but they still hadn't seen her as a person. She was just an object in their scenario, a problem to solve rather than a human being with feelings, fears, and a life. The girl's mind kept replaying the slap, the sting on her face, the look in the officer's eyes. She tried to steady herself, tried to breathe through the shock. She knew she had to remain composed, but inside, a whirlwind of emotions raged. She felt fear, anger, embarrassment, and confusion all at once. She wanted to cry, but knew the officers might interpret tears as weakness or defiance. Then, just as she began to think about what she could do next, a distant sound caught her attention. A familiar voice, calm but firm, calling her name. She turned her head slightly, hoping it was the friend she had been waiting for. Instead, she saw a woman walking quickly toward her, moving with confidence and authority. The woman's presence immediately shifted something in the scene, though the officers didn't yet know why. She had a calm intensity in her eyes, a way of moving that demanded attention without raising her voice. The girl felt a surge of relief. She wasn't alone anymore. Someone who cared for her, someone who could protect her, was there. People in the crowd began to murmur, noticing the woman. Some recognized her and whispered to each other, pointing subtly in her direction, but the officers didn't notice. They were still focused on the girl, unaware of who was approaching. The woman's steps quickened as she saw her daughter in trouble. Her mind raced, thinking about how to handle the situation without escalating it further. She had dealt with difficult circumstances many times in her life, but this was personal. This was her child, someone she had raised to be strong, kind, and respectful, and here she was being treated unfairly by people who didn't know anything about her. The girl's eyes met her mother's, and a flicker of hope lit up her face. She still felt hurt and scared, but the presence of someone who loved her so deeply reminded her that she didn't have to face this alone. She could breathe a little easier, even if only slightly, because help was finally here. The officers, however, still did not notice the significance of the approaching woman. They were still trying to maintain control, still treating the girl as if she were a threat. The scene remained tense, almost frozen in time, as the city continued around them, oblivious to the small drama unfolding on the street corner. The girl gripped her books tighter, her hands shaking slightly. She knew that whatever happened next could determine how the rest of the day would go, but she also knew she had to stay calm. She remembered the lessons her mother had taught her about standing strong, about facing injustice with dignity, about keeping her mind clear even when her heart raced. As the woman drew closer, the crowd's attention shifted. More people noticed her, sensing that she could make a difference. The officers glanced up briefly, but still had no idea who she was. The girl felt a small sense of relief, mixed with anticipation, knowing that soon everything might change. The moment stretched, heavy with tension. The girl, still reeling from the slap, braced herself for what was to come. She didn't know what her mother would do, didn't know how the officers would react, and didn't know if the situation would get worse before it got better. But one thing was certain, she was not alone anymore. She had someone by her side who could face even the most intimidating people and demand justice. In that ordinary afternoon on that busy city street, something extraordinary was about to happen. Something that would change the course of the girl's day and perhaps her life, in ways no one could have predicted. The air was thick with anticipation, the streets filled with quiet tension, and at the center of it all stood a young girl, brave but scared, clutching her books and waiting for what would come next. The woman's steps were steady but quick. Her eyes locked on the young girl standing in the middle of the tense street corner. She could see the fear in her daughter's eyes and the way her body tensed after the slap. Every muscle in the girl's body screamed that she wanted to run, to escape, to be anywhere but here. But the woman didn't rush or panic. She had faced difficult situations many times before, and she knew that her calm could anchor her daughter in a moment of chaos. As she got closer, the woman raised her hand slightly, not in anger, but in a jest.